Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on volume 13, chapter 1. Kicking things off, this is a meaty boy. Can I express this is a meaty boy? This is probably going to be a really long volume. I'm already kind of experienced that with the first two chapters. Like, holy crap, this is like twice as long as typical chapters for this series. So we're in for a ride here. But so far, things are pretty settled. I'm getting my little bit of a break after volume 12 and all the crying I did there. There's been a couple points in these first two chapters that kind of been hitting me a little bit, but we'll see as we go along. Sometimes I cry while reading and sometimes I cry while doing the Mushoku Monday. So hopefully this will be the first Mushoku Monday without me crying. But as per usual, thank you everybody that dropped by for the premieres. Hey chat, hope you guys are doing well. Thank you guys again for your support. Everybody that supports through just kind words, Patreon supporters, members of the channel itself, super chats and all that kind of stuff. It means a great deal to me. It's your guys' contributions that keep this going. So without further ado, I guess beforehand, I didn't really express my theories around Zenith in the last volume. There was this emphasis that Zenith chose to go in this one room where the previous owner was killed. Now, there's a couple of like random theories that kind of pop in my head, but most of them just being kind of just knee-jerk reactions. But my only real theory that I have that seems to have any sort of weight, like something that this makes sense that could be a possible conclusion, is that room I think had a magical implement in it. And there's a possibility that there might be something else in that room itself. Something in there that is sort of affecting her mind. A magical implement or something like that, that because the flow of mana or something is affecting her mind. Maybe when she's in that room, she feels like she's getting better. Like in a lot of cases with issues with the mind and stuff like that, there's like a fog effect that kind of happens. Like you know what you're thinking about, but it's almost hard to get past this fog that's sort of blocking it. And maybe when she's in that room, she feels like that fog is being removed. Like she feels more comfortable. That's my only theory that I have right now at the moment that makes sense why that room? Why does Zenith keep going to that room? I don't think there's any kind of tie to her or Paul unless at some point they traveled up there together and maybe she's been in that room before, but I think it's probably going to tie back to maybe a magical implement that was created there, which again, my previous theory is that Orsted was living there at some point and he made all these magical implements. And maybe that's a room where he has something there that maybe Rudi hasn't found, or maybe it's the chimney or something like that, because I think there was a chimney in that room, but we'll see. We'll see. But additionally, yes, that last chapter of the last volume, I got a little bit emotional and I kind of skipped over something that I did want to talk about, which that was the passing comment that Rudi made about how he was just a dumb kid, a stupid kid that was using his knowledge of his previous life for his advantage, which I think he has kind of brought this up in his own mind here and there. But this is sort of the first moment that he really kind of vocalized it. And I really do think that's a massive changing point for him. And I think that's, I put a lot of emphasis whenever you see like these big changing moments in Rudius that really stand out. Things that are passing comments that you can read through it and not really kind of stick on and really see the significance of the comment itself. This is the first time where he is vocalizing, I cheated. I was cheating the whole time. And yes, an admittance to what he, in his own mind, was admitting back then, that he was using his knowledge to sort of throw things back in Paul's face. Like that first time that Paul got onto him, what did he do? I'm not a kid. I'm going to throw this right back in his face. I'm going to throw him off. That's what he was doing. He was using that knowledge, using that maturity to his own advantage. And yes, additionally, because he has all this knowledge, even though he sort of made it a point that he never wants to act confident about things, he doesn't want to be full of himself. He's always holding himself back. But in his actions, often cases, he is using that for his benefit. So again, it's a really good admittance. It's not that there's so much I can draw from this because he has technically addressed it several times, but I like the admittance. But yes, with all that said, let's put volume 12 away and let's jump into volume 13, chapter 1, Roxy's new job. One morning, Rudi was roused from a slumber with a delicious smell, an alluring aroma that filled his nostrils and warmed his heart with wonderful emotions. Waking up, he found a goddess in the bed next to him, asleep, breathing softly through her charming little nose. Slowly creeping out, he gave a prayer to give thanks to having a holy personage in his bed. Hands shaking, he wondered if it meant. He pulled the sheets away to find her entire body had manifest before him. Her slender figure and deceptively youthful appearance. Lacking curves where one might expect them, a dark dot on her chest, a divine symbol perhaps. Was that dot supposed to represent her third eye? No, probably not, but it was no less holy. He does like that mole a lot. Again, it was the thing that he reprimanded Zanoba about. Why'd you get rid of the mole? Did he have permission to touch her? Surely he had heaven's implicit blessing. The goddess had come to him after all. He was the chosen one. I'll get into this a little bit later on because it's sort of bringing this back up, but it is one of those aspects of like, technically the story has never really kind of portrayed Rudius as being like this center of everything else. Like everything is formed around him. Like he's a side character. He himself even believes, I'm a side character. I'm not the main character. But here of all places, he is the chosen one. The holy sacred beast did not choose him. Roxy did. But was it okay to touch her when her spirit was roving elsewhere? Again, like in a dream state. There was a risk he would burden his soul with sin. The moment he reached out, she could flood the room with a bright light, telling him to be gone, purifying him into nothingness. A cruel dilemma. He couldn't help his little man this morning. This is so funny because this is sort of that funny pillow talk kind of stuff that we didn't really get before because Rudius was such a terrible state. So it's almost like Refugion's like, okay, now I want to have fun with this whole situation. Now I want to really address the fact that he's literally sleeping with a goddess. In her sleep, Roxy mumbled about the cold as she turned to her side, the nape of her neck peeking out. He felt like the luckiest man seeing the hickeys he left behind. Apparently she left some marks too. She that type. I did not realize she was going to be that type. Realizing they couldn't be late, he woke Roxy up. As Roxy woke up, giving a good morning, Rudius couldn't help but to continue to admire her body, nearly reaching enlightenment. Noticing him, she covered up her body with a blanket. The goddess had abandoned him, and the light faded from the world. Is there a reason that you look so dejected? Oh, it's nothing. I just want to take a nice long look at your body in the daylight. I don't think it's much to look at anyways. Don't be absurd. Come on. Pull back the blanket. Let me bask in your radiance. Good lord, you're certainly energetic this morning. Well, whatever. I suppose there really isn't any reason to be bashful at this point. She slowly pulled the blanket aside, and the light returned to the world. He named the darkness Eros, light Apollo, her belly button Cupid, and her thighs Amor. Why specifically those? He does say that he gives up after that point. Like, that's enough naming things. Roxy thanked Rudius for the previous night, awkwardly bowing a little bit. The previous night was something of a special one, something built up for a couple of weeks. They had agreed not to make Roxy an official wife until Sylphy gave birth, but they had some time to adjust to Lucy's arrival. He also thought that Roxy might be anxious of their new arrangement as well. To ease that anxiety, Rudius treated her like a princess last night. His jaw was a bit sore, but he put it through some real work. It was worth it. She seemed satisfied. You better take care of Roxy. She didn't even know what those techniques were. They were techniques that he developed with Sylphy. Wanting to overwhelm Roxy, he put them to use. It wasn't all as expected though. Roxy kept asking him questions every step of the process. This so sounds like Roxy. What are we doing next? How are we doing this? What do you want me to do? Or what do you want me to do? She said things like, what should I be doing now? She was the studious type, even in bed. While she wanted more details to develop her own skill, he wanted her to relax and let him handle it. Rudius is a giver, not a taker. It wasn't going how he expected it, but it wasn't half bad. Sylphy had her approach, and Roxy had hers. Both were satisfying, so he wasn't complaining. As Roxy rushed to get ready for work, Rudius admired her butt. As she detected this, he hid his gaze and got ready as well. Knowing that she was looking, he was tempted to start flexing. But she interrupted him. Touching his back, she apologized for scratching him. While he did see them, they were kind of a badge of honor for him. He remembered the face that she was giving when she gave it to him, which he assumes that she was thinking about the whole situation as well, because she never considered actually healing him. I like that kind of note there. It's like he's looking at these scratches and like, oh damn, that's a badge of honor. And she's like, I'm so sorry, but she's not healing him. So it's obviously she's like thinking about how she did it. After getting dressed, Roxy asked how she looked. She looked great. If anyone thought that she was less than perfect, they'd be stupid. That's Rudius's comment, not mine. She squeezed her hand into a fist, nodding to herself. It would be her first day on the job, and she couldn't mess it up, even though she's technically late right now. I don't know, I guess she could have made it at this point because they still have to like have breakfast and stuff. She'd be working as a member of the faculty at the university. And today was Rudius's first day as a third year there. But before that, we go back several months when Roxy got her new job. About a week after Rudius returned home from his journey, things calmed down again. Relaxing on the sofa, Roxy entered and asked if it'd be okay to work at the university. She had too much time on her hands and she wanted to be more useful. More specifically, she wanted to be a professor. Which yes, we kind of know this before. This was something that Roxy was looking forward to doing. She liked teaching, despite the fact that she sometimes felt like she was inadequate. Rudi did note that she seemed kind of restless, so it made sense. She spent most of her life as a solo adventurer, so she could handle almost any job, but she wasn't a housekeeping type. Also, they had 2 dedicated maids, so there wasn't really much that she could do, which that was kind of my mindset immediately, is like, well, just not like she's got much to do there. Most of the time, she was taking the place as his left hand. As lacking it, he still wasn't used to it. Assisting him in eating and getting dressed was helpful, though it wasn't necessarily as if he couldn't just bumble through it. She was an amazing teacher, and Rudi was blessed to learn magic from her. Given her talent, it would be a criminal to keep her as nothing but a missing hand replacement. Like, she's a gift to the world itself. I can't just keep her to myself, even though that's kind of appealing. I could keep her, but it would be a crime to the society if she was not given out to everybody. He had to make a sacrifice to enrich society with her presence. I'm sure it sounds a little arrogant to you, since I'm nothing special as a mage, but I've always enjoyed teaching people what I know. What? That's not what I'm thinking at all. He was kind of offended in a way. No matter what parallel world you existed in, you'd never find one that Rudi thought that she was arrogant. He was fated to respect her. The choice of Steins Gate. You can't break away from Steins Gate. Rudi encouraged her that she would be a great professor. She liked hearing that, even if it was a little embarrassing. Okay then, why don't we go talk to Vice Principal Genius right now? Genius? Wait, Professor Genius is the Vice Principal now? That's right. Do you know him? He was my master, actually. That's the moment where it's like, yeah, there's the confirmation there, but at the same time, it's like, oof, that's not gonna go well. It actually went a lot better than I thought it would. Rudi was confused by this, thinking that he was a fire mage, not a Saint Water mage. Maybe he was both and neglected to say anything. This is where I was like, I don't remember them ever mentioning that he was a fire mage. Maybe when they first encountered him, which is like, at this point, way back here in volume 8? So it kind of makes sense that if they did mention it, it was just so far back that I forgot about it. I'm afraid I said some very harsh things to him last time I saw him. I regret that now, but I was young and hot-headed. Don't worry about it, Roxy. The past is the past. Roxy told him that her master was pompous, prideful, full of a man. But the genius that he knew was polite and diligent. This is where I'm already kind of making the conclusion that it's probably the both of them. They probably were both arrogant, and at some point they both kind of matured. And Rudi even figures that he probably changed himself. What if he holds it against me though? I'll make sure that he puts it behind him, whether he wants to or not. Well, okay, hopefully it won't come to that. I'll set him straight. Roxy, don't worry, I'll set the guy straight. Rudi already owed Genius for his help, but for Roxy, he wouldn't hesitate to add to that debt. Arriving at the university, they found Genius buried in paperwork. He offered a smile that looked more like a grimace. He's not too happy seeing Roxy. When Rudi asked to speak to him, he brought them to another room. He was a busy man, but he never shooed Rudi away whenever he needed help. He wasn't a bad guy at heart. First of all, it's nice to see you again, Roxy. It's been too long, Master Genius. Didn't you say that I, wasn't worthy of the title? Roxy's gaze falling to the ground, she replied, I'm sorry about that. I was young and arrogant, I suppose. They both clearly thought that one wrong word would turn into an argument. I think that goes for both of us. I was far too proud myself. Once they both apologized, they seemed visibly relaxed. Again, this kind of was my theory at that point, was like, yeah, they both were in the wrong. And as Rudi kind of puts it, it's sort of that interesting aspect of having that wrong impression back here. And it's something that kind of builds up over time because they never resolve it, because they went their separate ways. It's something that boiled up and boiled up and boiled up. I mean, I had the same kind of theory with something like Ellen Lace. They parted on bad terms. And it was probably a side of why Ellen Lace was giving all this comments about how she'll never forgive him. I'll never forgive him, no matter what he says. It was probably that buildup that was been going on for years. They both seen each other as obstacles for a long time, but at some point developed mutual respect. I guess I can kind of see that. And that idea that, I mean, at least for Genius's side, obviously, that she's been gone for so long, and he's probably gotten plenty word of her exploits that Rudi has been creating for her. I mean, even when she was, working for PAX and stuff like that, he probably got word of that as well. But at the same time, he's hearing about the exploits of Rudius and all these things that Rudius is telling people that Roxy did for him. And yes, seeing Rudius himself in the flesh, he's probably like, man, what did my pupil do? What is this guy? But again, there's also an aspect I think of just maturing. Rudi didn't know what they argued about in the past, but it seemed like water under the bridge. In any case, what can I do for you two today? Well, Master Genius, in my travels after leaving the university, I eventually came to understand the joys and rewards of teaching. I was hoping to become an instructor here, if possible. Well, didn't you regard teachers as utterly useless at some point? You certainly have changed, Roxy. Genius had a slight grin. Looking to Roxy assuming trouble, she was smiling slightly. Maybe the both of them found humor in that situation. That is kind of one of those things. if they've figured it out, I mean, they pretty much already apologized. So beyond that point, it's just kind of just snarled remarks, just kind of a joking around with each other. And again, Roxy probably knows Genius far more than even Rudi does. I think he even admits that later on, is this idea of these two know each other, and they probably know each other's humor. Rudi was going to step in to push Genius, but he felt unhelpful now. Teacher, would it be okay if I left you two to work out the details? Huh? Oh yeah. I don't mind if you stay around though. Well, I was thinking that I'd drop in on a friend of mine. Rudi felt they had catching up to do, and felt Roxy might be reluctant to speak in front of him. It did make him sad though. He'd love to hear stories of her in her younger days. As that struggle like there, he kind of acknowledges that I think it really was that passing jab that Genius did. That idea of, well, you used to say that teachers were useless. I think he kind of feels that the two of them are kind of wanting to be a little bit more formal with each other, talk about the good old days. And he figures that he's sort of limiting Roxy from being able to get into that stuff because she doesn't want to talk about those embarrassing days. So let them reminisce of the old days. Even though, yes, it would be great to hear the stories of Roxy in the university. I don't know if Roxy gets serious, gets in that stuff, but I would love that if that's the case. Because, I mean, we even had comments before Roxy talking about being at the university and her bunkmates and all that kind of stuff. What a way to reintroduce Zanoba. Heading over to Zanoba's laboratory, he had informed Zanoba that he was going to be gone for 2 years, but he made it back in 6 months. He'd probably be surprised. While his trip wasn't especially positive, he didn't want Zanoba to worry about him, opting to be as cheerful as possible. I think that's that sad part. He knows, I think Rudius knows out of anybody, and I think he's made comments about this before in his own mind. Zanoba is just kind of a softie. And anything that he says really does worry Zanoba, despite the fact that Zanoba is an absolute goofball, and it seems like he's kind of detached from most people emotionally. This dude loves Rudius. And if there's any sign that Rudius is troubled, he's on top of it. Master, what's wrong? Rudius knocked and barged in with the announcement. Breaking news, Zanoba, I'm back. What? Inside, he found his friend straddling a life-size mannequin with an ecstatic look on his face. Oh my gosh. Could have seen that coming. I mean, what was the first time that he walked in on Zanoba? He was rubbing a statue naked. Rudis wondered what emotions were inside his mind at the moment. Of course, he knew. He knew it all too well. Rudis closed the door without a word. After 10 minutes of clattering inside, a small voice called out, I'm ready. Yes, Rudius obviously here is noting that I know what he's going through. Remember, what was Rudius doing in his past life, in his room, when his brother barged in and kicked him out? He was looking at some naughty stuff, and he was doing something to himself. He knows the feeling all too well. That's what he's noting here. I know what Zanoba's going through right now. Somebody walking in when you're just going at it to yourself. Extreme embarrassment while in the midst of ecstasy and somewhat. Oof. Poor Zanoba. Throwing open the door again. Breaking news, Zanoba, I'm back. Oh, how splendid. If it isn't my beloved master, Rudius. They embraced as if nothing happened. There was no reason for them to feel awkward. The two of them were best friends. Rudius didn't see anything. Nothing happened. It is such a bro thing. Again, because Rudius knows what Zanoba's going through, he's like, I'm just going to act like nothing happened because I know if he were me, I'd want the same thing. Bros don't talk about what bros do. What stays in the bro's mind stays in the bro's mind. Such a dorky reintroduction of Zanoba, and like I said before, it's technically expected. You certainly returned to us quickly, Master. I thought you were going to be gone for 2 years. Well, it's a long story, but we ended up coming back early. Ah, so you accomplished a 2-year quest in less than half the time. You never cease to amaze me. The room was full of dolls, statues, and folk art. Zanoba had acquired a lot of new toys. It was nostalgic to be back. Julie's desk was virtually covered in clay dolls and figurines. She was working hard in his absence. Of course, it's Julie. I want to see Julie again. Where the hell is Julie? Inquiring on Julie and Ginger, he stated they were out shopping. Apparently, that was why he was having his date. Rudius kind of felt bad for ruining this rare opportunity because, yes, they're typically around each other all the time, and this was like that one moment that he apparently had to do this. Oh, Master, your hand. Yeah, it's gone. I got careless out there. What opponent could be so fearsome enough to harm you so grievously? It was a Hydra that was immune to magic. A Hydra? I see. That's no small feat. Looking back, they were lacking in physical attacks. If Zanoba had come along, maybe they could have handled it more easily. He's still doing it. It's so surprising that still even now, He's thinking about that. Which, again, granted, even if you acknowledge that, look, I can't change the past. If you tell yourself in your mind, can't change it, it's done. I've done that so many times where I'm like, I keep going back and going, crap, if only I didn't do this. It's fine. I can't change it. 2 days later, God, I wish I didn't do this. It keeps hitting you, even if you acknowledge and accept it. Maybe they really should have turned back and recruited him. Or someone else. There wasn't much point to speculating now.
If the beast was resistant to magic, I can see why even you may have struggled to defeat it.
Yeah, and even if we were to manage to cut off one of its heads, they grew right back. It was no picnic, that's for sure.
It was capable of regeneration as well. How did you manage to slay it then?
Our swordsman chopped off its heads, and then I seared the stumps with fire.
Ah, now I see. The flesh itself was vulnerable, even if its hide was not. I presume you thought up the strategy yourself, Master.
I just remember hearing someone say that was a way to do it. Thinking on the battle wasn't doing wonders for Rudius' mood. He went in knowing how to kill the Hydra, but Paul still ended up dead. The more Zanoba complimented his victory, the more depressed Rudius felt. That sucks. Again, that was his whole mindset coming in here. Here's Zanoba. He always worries about me. I have to keep positive. If I show any signs that I'm in trouble, that I'm upset, he's going to pick up on it. And I don't want him worrying about me. Which I love the fact that Rudius loves Zanoba that much. It is some people that you just know are just going to take things so much more heavier from you that you're like, I don't want them to carry that burden. I don't want to worry them. And so you try to act positive. You try to hide your pain. But additionally, it sucks because as he's doing this, because he set his mind, I'm going to be positive. We were victorious. We took them down. Yeah, it was great. It was a tough opponent, but we got it. Saying all this stuff, recounting it, he's slowly breaking down. It's almost like he's lying and it's destroying himself. And then, yes, Zanoba picks up on it. Zanoba's gonna pick on it. He knows Rudius.
I must say, Master, you look rather gloomy.
Well, we did win, but it came at a heavy price.
Ah, I see. On that note, I think I have an idea.
I totally thought they were going to do it. For those that didn't see the last Mushoku Monday, at the very end, it's technically the last chapter of Volume 12 is after this. And in that chapter, he goes to visit Paul's grave. And he puts his hands together. And I was like, I wonder if this is a typo, that he actually put his hand on his stump. It said hands. So it kind of implied that he had his hand back. And my crazy theory at the time was that Rudius was going to go in the university, Zanoba was going to see that he was missing a hand, and immediately machete off his hand and stick it onto Rudius' hand and say, Rudius, heal, Master. And I almost thought they were going to actually do it right here, because he's like, oh, I could do this. I could do something about that. And he goes over to the desk and he just grabs a machete and... But no, he just grabbed another hand. Conveniently, yes, I'm going to admit, personally, when I read this part, I thought, this is a bit too convenient, Refugin. This was a little bit cheesy, but it's fine. Actually, my not crazy Zanoba chopping off his hand theory was that he was going to run into somebody that was extremely powerful in healing that could restore it. That we would kind of find out that Cliff has mastered the art of healing lost limbs. Or at least Cliff's connections getting to him to somebody that could. Or Ariel's connections. Zanoba smiled, tried to his desk, and pulled out a clunky-looking model hand. Some type of prototype glove.
Take a look at this, please.
What is this thing, Zanoba?
It's the fruit of my 6 months' labor.
Zanoba looked proud, with a meaningful smile on his face.
Indeed. I wasn't just sitting around in your absence, Master.
True, he was making love to inanimate objects. Oops. Reese didn't see anything. Like, when he said that, I'm like, dude, you said you were supposed to forget. Zanoba demonstrated by putting it on his bald fist, calling out something like an incantation.
Earth, be thou my hand.
Suddenly, it began to move. It went into a fist, then each finger stretched out one by one. It was smooth and natural looking.
It's a magical implement in the shape of a hand. It moves exactly as its bearer wishes. I followed your advice, Master, and continue my study of that mysterious doll with Cliff's assistance. This is my first practical implement of my findings. Master?
Yeah, sorry about that. Rudius was speechless. He did remember telling him to focus on studying the arms and the hands of the doll, but he didn't expect that Zanoba would make something this impressive in a matter of months. I mean, yes, that's kind of huge. 6 months. But again, that goes to credit to Zanoba himself. When he first took on this task, he wanted this to be his contribution to Rudius. I don't want to keep being on the sidelines helping you with nothing. Please let me study this. Let me handle this, Rudius. I want to help you. I want something besides my strength and my money to help you. He adores Rudius that much. And this was the fruit of that labor, which is so great. That's incredible, Zanoba. I'm honestly impressed.
Hey, but I haven't gotten to the best part yet. By using this device, I'm able to control my fearsome strength.
Which this is the part where it's like, yeah, that whole like convenience joke that I made earlier, this is where it sort of makes more sense. It's not the fact that Rudi has had him handle this part and end up helping him in this way. This glove is for Zanoba. He was making this so that he can actually craft stuff. So it kind of makes sense that this was kind of the thing that comes from this in the wake of Rudius losing his hand. Which again does also apply to what he was talking about with Cliff. I don't remember if he talked specifically to Cliff about it, but the idea was that when Cliff was working on the magical implement for Ellen Lace, he was like, oh wow, he's advanced so much, we could probably hopefully create something for Zanoba as well. Something that can control Zanoba's curse, just like he made these Ponsus to help with Ellen Lace's curse. And so yes, Cliff being involved with this research, it makes sense that this would be the conclusion they would come to. And yes, he even notes later on, if you have any problems with his hand, go to Cliff directly, because Cliff made it. So my assumption here is that Cliff and Zanoba were working on this research. Zanoba more the details from this thing, and then they started applying that to each other's research. And the idea that Cliff, specifically, is looking into magical implements, Zanoba over here was looking into this specific automaton. Zanoba had a smile of genuine joy on his face. His happiness was obvious and infectious. He's so happy. He's so happy his master's happy with something he made. Again, his master is somebody that has given him so much. These figurines that has changed his life, and now he's finally able to give something back to him. There's also an aspect of your master acknowledging your skills is great. If Zanoba could control his strength, he could make figurines himself. He found a way to create things he loved most. It was hard to imagine what this meant to him.
My hand returned to Earth.
With that, the hand stopped moving. Zanoba offered it to Rudius next. Rudius putting his stump into it, he feared it would fall off. But once he said the incantation, it drained a little bit of mana from his arm and pressed tightly against his stump. It wasn't using much mana, which made sense because otherwise Zanoba wouldn't be able to use it. The sense of him wearing something quickly faded. He could feel it connected to him. The crude-looking clay responded as if he was another part of his body. But it wasn't just that. He could feel through it as well, which made sense if he was going to use it for figurines. Yeah, that was the immediate thought there, is like, it's very hard to handle things when you're numb. And yes, when you're dealing with these small figurines, well, any crafting whatsoever, not having a sense of what you're touching, the texture of it, the roundness of it, it's very difficult to work on things. We take the sense of touching very for granted, even though sometimes, like, if you burn yourself, it sucks. We take it for granted. There's a lot of information your brain is getting just by touching something. Zanoba had made this with figurine making in mind. Just to see what would happen, Rudius casted a spell through his new fingers. A tiny ball of water appeared before them. Building something like this in half a year couldn't have been easy. Passion for figure making must have kept him incredibly motivated.
I wasn't entirely sure you'd be able to use it without a hand, but it seems if there aren't any major problems.
Zanoba had a satisfied smile. Yeah, it moves just fine. I can feel my fingers, and I can use magic.
If you wish to increase its strength, simply feed it more mana. Its power will increase accordingly. Of course, if you were to give it too much mana, I'd expect it to fall apart under the strain. It's sturdier than a normal human hand, but do be cautious.
Well, let's see. He fed it more mana, and the weight of the sculpture that was in his hand disappeared. But as he celebrated, there was a sharp crack. He snapped the sculpture's leg right off.
Oh, master, how could you?
Zanoba stared at him with a reproachful look on his face. Rudius did the unspeakable. He broke a figurine. Sorry, Zanoba, I'll make it up to you.
That was a traditional sculpture from an ancient principality of Kiara. I doubt I'll ever find its like again.
Well, maybe I can make you something new. It'd just be an earth magic sculpture, but...
Oh, how splendid. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pressure you.
A new sculpture, a new figurine from Rudius immediately cures any ailment that Zanoba might have. If you ever have problems with Zanoba, if he's too emotional, if he gets angry, just say, Zanoba, I'll make you a figurine.
What?
It's like a dog seeing a ball or a squirrel. But it's funny that he's promising that when he's acknowledged before that it takes a long time to make figurines. Wouldn't this technically be the second figurine that he owes him? I think he said before that he was going to make one for him. Unless he already finished that and just didn't note it.
The hand is yours to keep, Master Rudius. It's still only a prototype, of course, but I'm sure it's better than nothing.
Really? Are you sure?
With you and Cliff to help me, I'm sure we can make another comparable quality in no time at all.
That made sense. He was still researching. It would be nice to create one with more sensitivity. That way he can use it for recreational fondling. I like this is like the first thing that comes to Rudius' mind. I have a hand again. Yeah. It's like, jeez. He did mention in like the last volume that it sucked only having half the pleasure, so he was ready for something like this. It had room for improvement, but it had potential. Maybe make it transform into various tools or weapons. Drills, maybe a magic cannon on demand. I don't know. He was talking like the individual fingers and stuff like that, and my immediate thought is like Inspector Gadget or something. He's making some Inspector Gadget reference. A rocket punch. Zanoba, I think this might be a pretty amazing invention.
I quite agree. Not to toot my own proverbial horn, but I do think it's rather splendid little item.
While useful in combat or making figurines, it was a brilliant prosthetic. You can have an advanced magician heal a severed limb, but restoring a missing part was extremely expensive. Unless you were very wealthy, you pretty much just had to replace it with a crude peg or something. Even finding a magician capable of restoring an entire arm or leg was hard to come by. There were some in the holy country of Milis, but they were very rare. Again, this was my whole theory on the idea of, yeah, I probably could have had Cliff get some connections to bring somebody over. And again, this will still be something that Rudius can do in the future. This could just be a temporary. My thought process that they're putting so much emphasis on this implement itself that my assumption is that it's going to be something they'll make better and better, and it's just going to be something that Rudius doesn't want to part with. Like, even if he might even restore his hand just so that he doesn't have to wear the glove for, you know, his recreation. But I think he's going to want to make like multiple of these gloves. And that's like that aspect of the whole automaton itself. How about a full body armor suit that completely enhances your entire body? This starts this is literally where my mind starts to go into the idea of what if this is Rudius's route of getting around not having a battle aura. If he can't produce a battle aura, why not make an artificial battle aura? Maybe make an entire suit that Rudius can wear underneath his robe that enhances his body, allows him to jump really far, allows him to hit really hard, allows himself to take damage and block himself. This is literally opening up the door to a lot of stuff. Chat. But yeah, this is really interesting to kind of note the idea of how rare these people are. Because again, I'm assuming eventually he's going to want to make connections to somebody that could do that. It's probably going to be one of those things where he's like traveling to the Milis or something like that in the future, and he's just kind of, you know, talking with some people, and then suddenly out of nowhere, some guy just walks in the door and goes, "Oh, let me take care of that for you." And then Rudy's like, "Oh crap, thanks, dude." If they sold prosthetics like this for an affordable price, it could help a lot of people while making plenty of money. There's another one for the back of his pockets. There's another one for the back pocket. At some point, I'm going to have to make a list. Rudy's has so much in that back pocket, it's not even funny at this point. Scrolls, using the teleporter to sell goods from one place to another, the figurines, all that kind of stuff. And yes, the automatons. He's still going to work on that. He did note that the healers in Milis might not be too pleased about it, but they were on the other side of the world. As long as they had the backing of a large organization like the University and the Magic Guild, it would probably work out just fine. Neither Cliff nor Zanoba seemed to have the talent of naming it, so Zanoba had Rudius decide. He combined Zanoba with Cliff to come up with Zenith Prosthesis Prototype 1. Zenith. In any case, he now had a replacement hand. It wasn't precise and as sensitive as his old one, but it moved just fine, and he can at least feel things. It could be powerful with excess mana. He needed to practice it to be more precise. His goal was get to the point where he could gently squeeze Roxy and Sylphy's chests. Again, priorities. Priorities. Zanoba also admitted that it needed improvements, but they needed to continue to study the automaton. Asking Rudius what he should prioritize, he considered the glove's shortcomings. How its consumption of mana, while not affecting Rudius, would drain Zanoba's mana in 2 to 3 hours. The fingers were thick, the sense of touch wasn't perfect, but the glove was a byproduct of their research. Their goal was to make an automaton. The prosthetic would fetch a high price and was a convenient tool, but he didn't want it to take up all the research. He decided to put improving the prosthetic on the back burner and focus on the automaton. Now, I'm not really quite sure what the mindset is here for Rudius, because technically the prosthetic is something that could both benefit Rudius and benefit Zanoba. So why wouldn't he want to improve at least some of that prosthetic? I kind of wish that Rudius went into a little more detail in his own mind of what made this choice. It's almost like an aspect of, well, this was our original goal, and I don't want to stray from that original goal, despite the fact that this can benefit both of us more than an unknown. Now, you can say that this was a byproduct of that research, and what other things can that unlock? But it seems like his mind's more in the idea that we need to make these automatons because, man, they're going to sell like hotcakes. After Zanoba expressed his agreement, they continued talking about various things. For the most part, dolls and figurines that Rudius had seen on the Beggar continent. Zanoba's eyes lit up with excitement when he spoke about the glass sculptures. Anyways, how has Julie been since I've been gone?
Quite well. Just the other day, she finished the figurine of a certain gentleman. I believe she wanted to show it to you, Master Rudius.
Rudius wondered if she had finished the reserved figure. He wanted to see it. Yeah, there was a side of me that was kind of like, I temporarily forgot that was kind of a thing that he was eventually building to. But I'm kind of curious in the idea that why doesn't Zanoba know what it is? unless Zanoba just doesn't care enough about Rajur to remember his name. It seems odd. There's a side of that almost wonders if it's something else. Just a random thought that popped in my head. What if Rudi comes to the laboratory and she opens up this drawer and she's like, I finished a figurine for you. And she turns around and holds it up to him and it's literally Orsted. And he's like, Julie, how do you know what Orsted looks like? She's like, oh, I seen him the other day in the town. And Rudi just freaks out. It's like some sign that Julie's seen somebody that Rudius does not want to see. And so now he knows that Orsted's in town. That's good to hear, but if she's not going to be back until evening, I guess I might not be able to see her today.
Do you have other business to attend to?
My master's interviewing for a job right now. Once she's done, I was planning on going around to say hi to everyone.
Your master?
A knock came at the door. Very convenient knock at the door. Rudi, are you in here? This is the place, isn't it? Come on in, we were just talking about you, actually. Pardon me. Roxy walked in, examined the room, and then went to Rudi's side. This is quite an impressive laboratory. Is it really all right for me to be here? I feel like there's a few things that I shouldn't see. I wonder. It could just be the research he's doing with the automaton and she thinks that she shouldn't be seeing it, but I think of other things. Julie's in there. He's not leaving out inappropriate things. Don't be silly, Roxy. There's not a single place on this campus you're not allowed to enter. I don't really think that's up to you, Rudi. Maybe not, but you're welcome here at least. As they chatted, Zanoba stood frozen in place. He was trembling slightly. Zanoba, let me introduce you. This is Roxy M. Greyrat, my master in magic. It's nice to see you again, Prince Zanoba. I'm glad to find you looking so hale and healthy. Roxy bowed her head deeply to Zanoba. Oh. He stared at her, trembling more visibly than before. He raised his arms above his head and bellowed out. Oh, he leaped up like a frog, dropping flat on the ground, groveling before her. Prostrating himself with his hands stretched out in front. Roxy flinched in surprise and hid behind Rudius.
How wonderful to see you again, Lady Roxy. My deepest apologies for how rudely I treated you in the past. I had no idea at the time that you were my master's master.
I want to see this animated, and we're not going to be able to see it animated until season 3, probably. I'm going to start getting to stuff that now is like, oh, it sucks that it's going to take like 5 years before we see any of this animated. But yes, it does technically make sense. Like, Rudi is like a deity to Zanoba anymore as his master, and now he's realizing, oh crap, master of master, and I didn't treat her too well back here. Like, I wasn't treating her with, I don't know they've ever implied that Zanoba treated her terribly. He probably just ignored her, didn't want to have anything to do with her. But now, he should have paid her massive respect. He should have literally been groveling to her every time she went by him. Please stop groveling. You're the prince of an entire kingdom, and I'm just a magician. What if someone were to see this? Not to worry, teacher. If anyone tried to make an issue, I silence them myself. Not you too, Rudi. Have you lost your mind? I love this chemistry. Oh god, I love it. I'm already loving Roxy at the university. I love this chemistry. And there's a little bit more in the homeroom too. I just love the chemistry they're already kind of introducing to this whole mix. We just thought, God, she is so cute when she's all worked up. There wasn't anything to worry about, though. I think you just need to take a few deep breaths and calm down, Roxy. It's perfectly natural that Zanoba would want to prostrate himself in front of you. It is? Could you explain why? Well, Zanoba, it's perfectly natural, right? He nodded. The explanation is, it's natural, right? Yeah, that's the explanation.
Indeed, she is the master of my master after all.
Rias thought, see? Perfectly reasonable. All around. Everybody's agreeing. That's not an explanation at all. I want an actual reason. You don't need a reason to do what comes naturally, right? Just accept the gesture gracefully, why don't you? But, oh, very well then. Zanoba, would you mind standing? It didn't seem like they were making any progress in this conversation, so he relented. Zanoba stood up. He was so tall that he probably could see the top of Roxy's adorable head. It struck Rudius as decidedly impudent, but he would have to let it pass. Zanoba couldn't control his height after all. In any case, Miss Roxy, how was your interview? Do you think you'll be hired as a professor? Yes, Master Genius, the vice principal, that is, seemed to think that my skills as a magician were adequate. Well, of course they are. You are the woman who taught me magic, after all. You did most of your learning on your own, Rudi. I'm not sure how much that says about my potential as an educator. We've talked about this over and over and over again, but I am still very curious at what point Rudius is finally gonna say, hey look, this is why I adore you so much. I think he sort of implied a bit of that way back when she saved him, back at, you know, the bigger continent, but I think that's probably gonna be something that's gonna come up here eventually. Like, some point he's probably gonna have to lay it out to her. This is what you did for me. This is what you did for me, not the magic. This. But technically in this conversation here, they're talking about magic, teaching magic. That has nothing to do with what he was taught. Roxy was starting next term as a professor. It called for celebration. They also need to celebrate their marriage. They still need to celebrate his sister's turning 10, and another family member will be on the way. It may be easier to consolidate them all into one big party. Paul's letter also suggested that they would have a party once they all made it back. There wasn't any rush though. They all had a lot on their plate, and it would be better to wait until it all calmed down. Are you flagging it, Rudi? We'll celebrate later. They never got to celebrate. But there, yeah, that's another quick gut punch. Never got to have that party with Paul. Rudi remembered that he had to say hi to everyone else, so he decided to part with Zanoba. Zanoba was grinning, and it caused Rudi to do as well. More than anything, Rudi was just excited to introduce Roxy to everyone else. In parting, Zanoba suggested that Rudius take the glove to Cliff directly if he had any problems with it. Again, this has got that idea that, yes, that's technically something that probably Cliff created through the research that they've been doing together. As they walked down the halls of the university, he noticed his hand creaking. It was probably unreasonable to expect the thing was designed with silence in mind. Is that prosthesis a magical implement, Rudi? That's right. It's apparently a product of the serious research and development on Zanoba's part. It's very impressive work, I must say. It seems capable of very precise movements. Given how well it works, I think I'll be able to get by just fine from now on, even without having you around all the time. Oh, right, I suppose. Roxy's face took a slightly downcast expression. I'm sorry, Rudi. I suppose I wasn't taking your situation to account. I was so eager to become a teacher, I didn't even think about the trouble it might cause you. What, you mean with my missing hand? It's not a big deal, really. Roxy had been a big help, but he didn't want to ask her to take on a role as his personal assistant. He wanted her to put her own plans first. Yeah, it's one of those sad things, like at this moment right here, it feels like she parted ways with him for like a brief moment, and he goes off and gets a new hand. I'm sorry, I went off and became a professor, and you had to go find a replacement hand. It's a little bit silly, I admit, it's a little bit silly. There were plenty of people in his life that would be willing to help him if he needed. Not that he had to say it out loud because he didn't want her to think that she was replaceable. In any case, I'm certainly glad that you have a left hand again. Yep, now I can touch you twice as often now. He gently touched her shoulder with his artificial hand. He could feel the warmth and softness of her body, even through her robes. Apparently it was sensitive to temperature as well. He kept caressing Roxy for a lengthy period of time, but she accepted it without complaint. Uh-oh. Roxy's fine with PDA. I just found this really funny because it spent so much time showing how Rudi wanted to, publicly show his affection to Sylphy, and she kept getting mad at him. And now finally it comes to here, and it kind of goes out of its way to show that she's perfectly fine with it. Again, it kind of shows that aspect of how different Roxy is from Sylphy. Anyways, I want to introduce you to everyone. Mind coming along with me? Oh, of course. She nodded, looking a little nervous, which sucks. Now it sucks reading this because now I know why she looks a little nervous. She was expecting to go around and be introduced as a wife. For the afternoon, Rudius introduced her to friends and acquaintances. Linnea, Priscilla, Ariel, Luke, and Anahoshi were the important ones. He wanted to see Cliff as well, but when they got to his laboratory, they heard something behind the door, some moaning, so they thought they would come back later. Reactions were varied. Linnea and Priscilla responded in an amusing way. Upon getting a whiff of Roxy's scent, they both twitched to attention with fear in their faces, as they stood meekly with their tails between their legs. Reese introduced her as his beloved teacher, to which they both promptly bowed their heads. Perhaps beast folk were quick to recognize people they shouldn't mess with. Their instincts were right on the money. Can of worm. Just can of worms opened. Okay, so my immediate thought here is there was a lot of emphasis on the idea that they whiffed Roxy's scent. So the assumption is that they smelled that, yes, Roxy and Rudius got it on that morning. They could smell Rudi and Roxy, pretty much. And so with that, being that they are beast folks, they immediately see that she is pretty much their pack leader. Because she is now partner with Rudius, she is literally a leader of the pack. They have to bow to her. Yes, the other thoughts that I have is, do they smell Migurd tribe? And do the beast folk specifically don't like the Migurd tribe? Or are they afraid of the Migurd tribe? I don't think we've ever noted that being the case. And the last, yes, odd thought process I have is, again, with the whole labyrinth and how Rudi knew where Roxy was at. Do they smell something special about Roxy? I don't think that's probably the case. It's probably the first of anything. She is a pack leader now. And again, Rudius is introducing her as just, this is my teacher. They're like, oh no, that's not just your teacher. That's not just your teacher. The only thing that kind of ruins the first one is why don't they have that fear of Sylphy? They could smell Rudius on Sylphy. They know that they're married, but they don't show Sylphy respect. They don't like Sylphy. And that's mainly because of their history together, of course, because Sylphy beat them down, made them lose everything. And we'll get a little bit of that in the next chapter, as they kind of have that little bout again. So maybe it's not just simply that she slept with Rudius, and they can smell it, and thus they think that she's a pack leader. Again, maybe it's either the fact that she's a Migurdian, or they smell something special about Roxy. Chat. No. Ariel and Luke, on the other hand, were surprisingly oblivious. The first word out of Ariel's mouth was, "I see you remembered to stop by after your trip at least." She didn't seem genuinely upset, but she did say that she could have offered assistance. Considering that his inadequate preparations really costed him, hearing that left him a little shamefaced. Rudius apologized for the oversight. Again, there's that whole thing that no matter what, he's going to constantly have that "but what if." Upon introducing Roxy, they were surprised and looked at each other. Rudius figured that they were surprised because such a young magician would be taking on the role at the faculty here. Still, Ariel greeted Roxy politely, without a hint of confusion in her voice. She's still a princess. This is the one, while I kind of have my theories on Linear Persona, this is the one where I'm not quite too sure. Does Ariel know who Roxy is? I figured that Ariel would have looked into Roxy because of the fact that she is Rudius's master. And maybe the actual in person is a little bit shocking to her. But again, I think it goes back to that whole thing where I think Ariel and Luke knew that Roxy was the second wife, and so they're kind of surprised that he's introducing her as Roxy Migurdia. Now, yes, earlier with Zanoba, they specifically mention Roxy Grey Rat, but apparently every time after that has been Migurdia. Now, Nahoshi was somewhat worse for wear. Maybe she caught a cold or something. She was coughing like crazy. When she seen Rudius, she smiled in relief, muttering, "Now I can get my research back on track." Go figure, she's like, immediately, "Oh great, now I can continue, finally." Hey, be glad it was only 6 months. Upon introducing Roxy as being one of the new professors here, she responded with disinterest. Feeling her response was a little too curt, he elaborated on Roxy's virtues and talents. She doesn't seem to understand how great Roxy is. Sadly, Nanahoshi just grimaced and called him a Krail robber. Oh my gosh. Because Roxy looks very young, she's calling him a cradle robber. Rudius figures it was too much for an ordinary high schooler to grasp the greatness of Roxy. By evening, they visited everybody that he wanted to. As he was about to suggest them leaving home, Roxy spoke up, slightly disgruntled. "Rudy." "Yes, Roxy?" "I'm very happy that you've taken the time to introduce me to your friends, but I feel you're being a bit excessive in your praise for me." "Really? It wasn't intentional, I assure you." "Are you serious?" "Well, as far as I'm concerned, no words I can offer can possibly be sufficient to really capture how wonderful you are. I thought I was selling you a little short, if anything." Frowning, Roxy jabbed a finger at him. "Okay, there you go again. Are you teasing me or something, Rudy? Don't be ridiculous. My respect and admiration for you is real as it gets." "Oh, for crying out loud. You know, whenever you start calling me teacher, I can't help but feel you're just messing with me." Roxy paused and let out a long sigh. He thought his opinions of her were justified, but it seems like she found it somewhat overblown. "Putting that aside though, you introduced me to quite a few of your friends and told them that I was your teacher, but you didn't mention that I was your wife." He realized how badly he screwed up. Possibly something he couldn't fix at this point. She was right. She wasn't Roxy Migurdia anymore. She was Roxy M. Greyrat now. I'm assuming the M is Migurdia, which is an interesting thing that I probably should look back at. Again, last names are pretty much kept mostly for nobles. So people like Sylphy was just known as Sylphy. She didn't have a last name. Whereas like Zanoba is Zanoba Sharon. Rudius is Rudius Greyrat. Now there is the aspect of Notos and Boreas. So I'm wondering if Notos and Boreas are an aspect of carried over last names and not simply like our world where it's typically a middle name. But I do like this whole segment because this is one of those moments where, like I said earlier, I'm wanting at some point Rudius to sort of express exactly why he admires her so much. Because again, in her mind, it's just the fact that she taught him magic, and that's not that important because he's so much better than her, and that she feels like he learned all that stuff himself. She taught her so much things and left such an insane impression on her that he has put her on this pedestal. And like I keep saying over and over again, I'm waiting for the day that finally he takes her off that pedestal. Or if he never does. And I think this is that point where thankfully, it's almost a lot of credit to Roxy herself. She's finally getting sick of it. I am your wife. I'm not your teacher. I am not your grandmaster. Stop putting me on this pedestal because I want to stand equal with you. I think she wants to stand equal with him. Just like every other character in this world has always put Rudius on a pedestal and wants to stand equal with him. That's the whole thing, the whole story behind Edis herself is I can't stand equal with him, so I have to go get better. We're not well balanced because I'm so inferior compared to him. Roxy here seems like she's legitimately getting angry at him. Stop overpraising me. And then she keeps kind of firing back going, but you're so amazing. Which is, yes, is sweet. Like, she probably would see that as like, yes, that makes you feel really good, but there's a negative effect to it. She feels like he is over boasting and that he's insulting her at this point. But he keeps so firm to it, it's hard to really argue. No, it seems like even though I think he's being insulting to me, he's not. He really does see me this way. But no, it's really more like she's giving up. Like, fine then. But there's this other problem. You're not introducing me as your wife. It's once again dredging back that concept that they introduced a while back. This idea of almost distancing yourself from me. We're supposed to be wed, but you're boasting about me as your teacher and you're calling me Roxy Migurdia. Am I even your wife? Or are you just messing with me? She doesn't understand it. Truly, she doesn't understand it. Keep in mind, besides their time together when he was younger, and their time together on Beggar Continent, she hasn't dealt with what everybody else has dealt with. This pedestal he puts people on, and that almost distancing way that he talks about people. She's now learning that, and how having to deal with it and getting frustrated by it. But yeah, anyhow, she was right. She wasn't Roxy Migurdia anymore. She was Roxy M. Greyrat now. He introduced her wrong, she made her greetings, and he figured a part of him assumed that was enough. That it was obvious that they were married. At least he was confident that someone as sharp as Ariel had figured it out. Again, this is kind of what I was thinking right there. Maybe her and Luke know this. I mean, again, probably through her information network, but still. Still, Roxy had every right to be furious. He just wanted to emphasize her greatness more than anything. That was his priority. It's like one of those aspects of it. He's not a bad person, but he did screw up. A side of him thinks that she's far too good to be married to the likes of him, while she wanted to be introduced as his wife. That is sort of an interesting thing to add to this whole situation here. That maybe in the end, I mean, the whole scene when they first woke up is this like idea of, oh my gosh, there's this deity in my bed. Again, he worships her. So it makes sense for somebody with that mindset for so long of his life. So much of his life has been spent deifying her that now suddenly it just doesn't seem real. She's too good for me. This was a huge blunder. Yes, she was his second wife, which didn't make her any less of a wife. They'd be spending the rest of their lives together. And maybe have a child. I'm so sorry, Roxy, sweetheart. But you know how much I love you, right? How can I make it up to you? You want me to introduce myself to your parents? No. I don't think that's necessary. It's a long trip, after all. We'll get there eventually. Eventually, he thought. He hoped Rowan and Rokari were doing well. Now that he was married to Roxy, they were in-laws. Yeah, Rowan wasn't too happy about Rudius talking all high and mighty about Roxy. I don't think Rowan's going to be too fond of it because he was kind of pushing Rudius away quite a bit when he was acting all chummy with him. He still owed them for their assistance before, and he kind of wanted to make time to see them. Using teleportation circles, it could take a couple months. All right, then. We'll have to make time to go one of these days. There was no rush. Once things were settled, they could make a trip with the family. Pushing that to the back of his mind, Rudius headed home with his new wife at his side.
Legends of the University #1. The boss can fire his hands like a rocket.
I don't know what that is. I haven't figured out what that is yet. I'm sure that's going to be something really important. I noticed that it's like, at least for 2 chapters now, it seems like that has to end every chapter now with that. So I'm assuming these are going to be stories that are building up that's probably going to blow up in Rudius' face at some point. That's my prediction. They seem to be going out of their way a little bit too much for this. But yes, Chapter 2, Year 3. The first day of Rudius' 3rd year at the university arrived. In the living room, Sylphy was feeding Lucy. Lucy was only a few months old, but strong and healthy. Sylphy was doing well too. The only difference is that he felt like she had grown more feminine. Maybe it was her hair, mother aura, or the fact that she had gotten a little older. Whatever the case, she was blossoming into a Hollywood-style beauty. He often found himself hesitating to speak to her. He was so awestruck. When he got her attention, she was the same Sylphy he always loved. Eager for attention and affection, always reassuring for him. Sylphy noted Lucy's energy as she fed on his wife's chest, just as vigorous as he did in bed, like father, like daughter. I just knew this was coming. I'm reading into this and it's like, he's gonna say it. He's gonna say it. Lucy was healthy, but a bit quiet. Here it comes. Here it comes. Here it comes. She didn't cry much at all. She didn't cry much at all. For a while, he was afraid she was sick or had a physical problem. However, Sylphy just called him a worrywart. He didn't remember being so jumpy when his siblings were born. It was just a bit different when it was your own child. Once Lilia mentioned that she reminded her of Rudius at that age, That gave him a start, obviously. The word reincarnation flashed through his mind. He was a pretty crappy person in his previous life. He was worried that Lucy could be a reincarnation of some good-for-nothing moron from Japan. And that gnawed at him for a while. Yes, we're finally going to address this. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. And chat, zippy part. This is massive zippy part. Obviously, for a long time, I've kind of been thinking about this. Like I mentioned earlier, one ongoing theme, mostly through like what was covered in the first anime season. One thing that's always been sort of chewing at my mind is this idea that Rudius never sees himself as the main character of a fantasy world. He is not the protagonist. It's always somebody else. The one spot that I always note is this idea that when he was questioning the man god's actions and what he was having Rudius do, what did he say? It wasn't about me. It's about Rizurd. He thought maybe this whole thing the man god was making me do was to get Rizurd over here. Rizurd's the main character. And again, with the Sacred Beast. The Sacred Beast was a massive question mark. This is a Sacred Beast of this village that will essentially follow the hero. Like the person that's going to save the world, that Sacred Beast is supposed to follow. But they were saying it wasn't going to happen for a while. So my theory back then was this idea that, what if Rudius, and again, chat, zippy zips, massive zippy zips here. What if Rudius is supposed to set up the actual story of the hero? What if he's the prequel story of the actual hero? Maybe he's supposed to birth the child that would be the hero. What if Lucy is the hero? What if Lucy will one day be confronted by the Sacred Beast and she is supposed to be the one that would continue on? Because this is supposed to be, and I think at the time they were saying it's like something that's going to happen in 100 years. So it makes sense for an elf, half elf, to be the one that would take on those rings. But this is where it's like already kind of itching at that. Yeah, I was waiting for this. And I give Refugin credit because I think he's at this point going to go, yeah, it makes sense that Rudius would think this. It makes sense at this point, Rudius would be starting to wonder, well, it happened with me. Why would it not happen for my daughter? There's a possibility here of this being a thing. Again, it was the joke that we're kind of making with the Paul reincarnated into a child. It makes sense that he would question this, especially, like I said, the moment I read Baby Ain't Crying Much, I'm like, there we go. There we go. But we'll see. Chat, we'll see. That gnawed at him for a while, ultimately resorting to him speaking to his baby in Japanese and English to see if she reacted. It was probably comical to anyone that walked by. He said things like, "You figured it out by now, right? This is a parallel universe." And, "You are my sunshine. I am a pen." This is a pen. It's supposed to be this is a pen. It's supposed to be this is a pen. He remembered Aisha snickering from the shadows. He ultimately decided that she probably wasn't reincarnation. She just smiled and babbled incoherently. It was possible that she was hiding her true nature, but he didn't know how many grown-ups could keep on this imitating act of a baby for so long. Even if that was the case, it was kind of cute to imagine somebody desperately pretending to be an infant. He's gonna just like, whatever. But I like this. I like this because he's realizing it. He realizes at some point, but that's fine. If that's the case, that's fine. Lucy was definitely cute. He could sit by her cradle and never get bored watching her. All in all, he didn't care if it was a reincarnation. He was going to take good care of her either way. Paul had done the same for me, after all. Love it. Love it. It all comes full circle, Rudius. It all comes full circle. It's time to be a dad. And again, this is what I was talking about before. Even with the tragedy of losing his father, losing Paul, the important thing that happened there, despite that tragedy, the important thing was that Rudius acknowledged Paul as his father because he needs to take everything that he learned from Paul and help it guide him. Not that he needs to do all the mistakes that Paul did, which he's pretty much doing all of them at this point, besides, again, forcing himself upon a poor girl at a dojo. But use that information to know now what is it like to be a parent, the things that you will do for your child. And yes, one of them is right here. No matter what my child, how weird they act, because it would be maybe because they're a reincarnation, I will still raise them right because that's what Paul did. Despite me acting weird to Paul, he still raised me as his son. Our daughter's adorable as ever, I see. No kidding. Why is she so cute anyways? Probably takes after her mom. He hugged Sylphy, lowering his head to kiss the back of her head, but smelled her hair instead. She smelled faintly of milk. It was a sort of natural perfume. It's obsessed with the milk. I don't get it. I don't get it. Thanks, Rudi. She smiled shyly as she rubbed her face against his hand. Hello there, Roxy. How was Rudi last night? It's such an awkward question. It's such an awkward question. Roxy twitched in surprise. He was very attentive. Really? I know he can be pretty rough at times. He didn't scare you or anything. No, not really. It was the second time, after all. And he was gentle with me. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't be saying this. You have nothing to apologize for. I don't? Nope. They were awkward, but not hostile. It was obvious they were trying to be respectful and considerate to each other. To Rudi, it seemed like both of them wanted to make it work. He realized they would be leaning on Sylphy a lot. Her open-mindedness was the only thing that made this arrangement possible. Well, yes, technically, and it's all three of you. All three of you have to make this work. And I guess, yes, he's kind of meaning the idea of leaning more on Sylphy. But again, this is something that's not just accepted by Sylphy, but it's being accepted by Roxy as well. This is a three-way road here. But yes, this would have never have happened if she didn't agree to it, because he needed her to be okay with it. Mostly for her, but additionally for himself. This was something he wasn't going to be able to accept himself. Like I mentioned before, I think if Sylphy showed physically that she's like, yes, if that's what you want, and she looked upset, I don't think Rudius would do it. Like, okay, sorry, it ain't happening. It was because she was so positive about it that I think it made it acceptable. Like, it made sense that she's accepting this openly. But again, I would argue Sylphy has always been difficult in understanding what she really truly feels because they've sort of portrayed her as keeping that stuff bottled in, not expressing outwardly, because that's what Silent Fit's sort of, I think, ingrained upon her. Aisha strode in, singing, breakfast, breakfast, time to get some breakfast. It was a crappy song, maybe made up on the spot. Maybe geniuses had their weak points. You know it's cute, Rudius. Good morning, Rudius. Good morning, Miss Sylphy, Miss Roxy. Today's breakfast is pretty much the same as always. Lilia corrected her from behind. That won't do, Aisha. Tell everyone what you're serving. We have a potato and yoko bean soup, served with white bread and high nutritious horse milk. He figured there was a value to keeping up formalities, even though they were eating the same thing pretty much every morning. Lilia nodded in satisfaction as he asked everyone to wait a little bit longer. She then went up and fetched Zenith before thanking everyone for their patience. Zenith stepped in the room, paused to stare at Rudius for a moment, then sat at the table, moving on. I just gotta read it really quickly and keep moving. It's gonna hit me every time, just keep moving, Andrew. But no, I do like this chemistry because it feels like Lilia is still keeping strict on Aisha, but it seems like she's not immediately chopping her on the head and saying, you're doing it wrong. Be formal. That is your master. It seems like there's it feels like with these months passing, since I'm all coming back, it feels like there's just based on her coming in there singing and just kind of saying same thing as always, it seems like there's been some wiggle room given. That Aisha is seemingly more cheerful and being allowed a little more leniency. Good morning, Mom. Months had passed, but Zenith's memory hadn't returned. She was changing in small, noticeable ways, though. In particular, she acted very differently when Norn was around, stroking her daughter's head and trying to feed her from her own plate. Almost like she thought Norn was 2 or 3 years old. Norn seemed unsettled at times, but accepted Zenith's affections. Rudius assumed she had mixed feelings about it. Yes, this is one of those, again, going back to Andrew talks about his own experiences thing. This is a thing. This is definitely a thing where it kind of talks about it a little bit later, but there is an aspect of almost allowing yourself to be in an uncomfortable situation because you want to be beneficial to the party. I don't want to pull away because it might actually be my mom there. Norn understands what's wrong with Zenith. And she wants to be there for Zenith, but it doesn't shake the fact that you still feel uncomfortable. It still hurts, and it's still hard to deal with. But you almost kind of grit your teeth and kind of accept it, like deal with it, because I don't want to pull away in case it might harm her. She might be in there, and me being uncomfortable and moving away might hurt her. Norn was still at the age to be attached to her mother, or get ready to rebel against her. Either way, it's a period of life where a relationship with a parent feels important. Norn understood Zenith's condition, and she was clearly trying to put her mother's feelings first. He never expected that kind of maturity from her a few years ago. But it seems people do change. Yeah, he's noting that Norn has grown up. Like, if this was back when Norn first showed up here, she probably wouldn't be acting like this. Now again, I don't know, because it does feel like there's been such a massive disconnect from Norn in such a growing point of her life. Again, she was very young when the displacement incident happened, and all she had was her father from that point on. She probably has very few memories of her mother anymore, but she still knows this is my mother. And despite the fact that she's treating me like I'm a 2 or 3 year old, I have to just deal with it. grit my teeth and deal with it because she's still my mother. And I think still inside there, Norn loves her mother and wants her mother to get better. But again, it doesn't put aside you being uncomfortable about it. It was hard to know what any of it meant on Zenith's side. Did she feel connected with her daughter, or was it instincts? Regaining her memory slowly? It seemed to be best to wait and see what happens. Again, I am constantly, because it's such a personal thing, I'm constantly wondering what direction Refugian is taking this whole story. Because again, there's so many different ways that a mind can be affected, and I've experienced some where it's a deterioration of tissue itself, and so you sort of revert back to a more childish state. You get pushed back years in your memories. If she's treating her like she's 2 or 3, it could be that she's reverting back to the time when she was 2 or 3, and thus she's acting like she was 2 or 3. She sees Norn being bigger right here, but in her mind she's thinking, oh, it's a 2-year-old. Here, I gotta feed her. Sylphy will be returning to the university today, leaving Aisha and Lilia to take care of Lucy. Reese had decided to hire a wet nurse. It was a lady named Suzanne, who lived in the neighborhood. A former adventurer and mother of 2. An old acquaintance of his. Truth be told, I never expected anybody from Volume 7 to be ever mentioned again. Yes, I knew Soldat because Soldat's kind of a part of his story. It's a very significant part of his story. But I never expected Suzanne or anybody else to be brought up. So it kind of makes me wonder, will, other characters be brought back into the picture as well, like Sarah? I don't think so, because that would probably be a little bit too significant for them to kind of veer a bit, because 7 was an original to the series. But yeah, super exciting to see at least Suzanne come back into the picture. And yeah, apparently Suzanne been busy. Suzanne apparently been busy. And that is kind of a heartbreak too, because it does technically acknowledge the fact that Suzanne is pretty much retired. Like not many years after he left her, she retired. Makes you wonder what happened to the party. Hopefully nothing bad. Chat, don't need to know. But yeah, super, super cool to see her come back. I can't wait to see her in that. Hopefully it's more than just that. After their meal, Rudi started his first day as a 3rd year at the university. When he arrived, he was immediately greeted by new students. Rough-looking types that were all oddly respectful. Yes, you know why. Lenny and Priscilla keep getting everybody in check. Maybe he was projecting an aura of authority these days. Maybe it was because he was a father and the head of a household now. No, it's the first, like I said, it's Lenny and Priscilla. As he was reflecting on this, the most dangerous-looking students appeared before them. Hey, boss. Good morning, boss. Oh, morning to you too, Fitz and Miss Roxy. Again, note, just Fitz. As well as talking about earlier, there seems to be something about Roxy, and again, I think because they had such a bad experience with Fitz. It was Linnea and Priscilla, of course. In their final year, they hadn't changed much at all. Linnea, strutting arrogantly. Priscilla, gnawing at some ham. Aren't you lucky guy, boss? Strutting into school with the girl on each side? Where do you get off dumping us and then picking up a second wife anyways? Yeah. Unfair what it is. We're graduating this year, Guess we gotta grab ourselves someone too. Yeah, it all comes down to this. Gotta get a man before we head home. They're so mad. They're so mad. They seem genuinely worked up. Envious over him. Not envious of Roxy and Sylphy. Envious over him. They clearly want to be leading a pack of their own. They want to be mamas. They want to lead a pack. Come on, Rudius, step up, dude. Sylphy bid them luck with a smile. Rudius was surprised at her teasing response of confidence in her own position. She did know them longer than he did. It made sense that she was comfortable with dealing with them. Roxy, on the other hand, seemed to have taken their words at face value. She dipped her head with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry about this. I suppose I cut in line, didn't I? Yeah? Huh? Oh, no, that's okay. We didn't mean anything by it, Yeah, we were just mad at our lack of sex appeal. We're not dissing on you, Miss Roxy. They were apologizing frantically to Roxy. Roxy was worthy of such difference, but it was almost creepy how desperately they were. I swear there's something here. There's gotta be something here. I cannot wait. He did expect them saying, we're way sexier than this little shrimp, you. Yeah, marrying a demon. Not that he would tolerate it. Oh, there's so much chemistry right here. It's so freaking great. All he needs now is like Zanoba and Buddy Guy to be right here, and it'd just be a bonkers. Throw Kishirika in too. This must be tough for you too, right? Hang in there, Fitz. Yeah, won't be easy keeping up with her, but I know you can do it. Sylphy blinked, looking a little bit nonplussed. Better get your second going ASAP. Yeah, gotta maintain that lead. What? Oh, still show me plenty of love, Ah, poor sweet kid. I'm tearing up. Come on, Fitz. A quiet type like you seriously gonna fade into the background once boss picks up number 3 and 4, right? That's so sad. They throw in like massive shade. Poor Sylphy. Quiet Sylphy's just kind of disappearing. Rudius was frustrated. He had no plans of adding anybody else to his family. Yeah, right. Even if he did, he wasn't going to start neglecting Sylphy. He would never forget her putting her body on the line to help him out. Again, it's the only thing Rudius... Rudius, stop bringing that up. Huh? That's not true. Right, Rudi? He couldn't make out her expression on her glasses, but she sounded anxious. Of course it isn't. He pulled her in for a hug and made a public display. I love you, Sylphy. Don't clip that. That was Rudius. Joking. He earned a round of applause from random bystanders. Sylphy blushed and wiggled inside of his arms. Rudi, come on. This isn't the place or time. Oh, really? You're the one that asked me for reassurance. Well, if you're going to make a big gesture, you ought to do the same for Roxy, too. Fair enough. He glanced over at Roxy. That's not really necessary. I'm all right. She had something like an expectation in her eyes. He embraced Roxy with his left arm. Ah, the bliss. A wife on both sides. I love you both. Such a dork. This earned him a chorus of boos from the students. Probably members of Miller's church or something. Whatever. Their laws didn't apply to him. He was the law. Sylphy was red as a tomato, excusing herself to meet with Princess Ariel. Rudius had to be reminded that she was Fitz at the university. He had forgotten this since he was gone for so long, though he didn't feel the point of keeping up the charade at this point. That's the interesting thing, because I specifically remember that Ariel pretty much already put an end to that. Like, she said that she wanted Sylphy to start coming to school dressed as a female. Like, she was pretty much letting her be more feminine. So why is Sylphy still keeping up the charade? Is it something that she wants to do that is against what Ariel said that she can do? Specifically, Volume 10, after Rudius made his confession in front of Ariel, Ariel pretty much at that point said, Sylphy, since you're going to be Rudius' wife, you don't have to dress like a man anymore. Return to dressing like a woman. She wanted her to pretty much become Sylphy. Now, on record, she's probably still going to be Fitz. In school, and all the records, she's called Fitz. So that makes sense. But she can be herself now. And then later on, after the duel with Luke, that was the point in which we pretty much got a confirmation from Ariel's side that she wanted to stop relying on Sylphy, which what I took at that point is essentially trying to shed this facade that of the existence of Silent Fitz. I no longer want to rely on her. And I felt that was a lot to do with the fact that she wanted Sylphy to be with the man that she loves. She wanted Sylphy to go, which was a huge shift in my perspective of Ariel, because I was always questioning her. Now, that's okay to question Ariel because that's sort of how she was wrote. She's somebody that manipulates people by her speeches, and the words that she speaks drives people. Not that she's inherently evil, it's just that she uses people for her benefit, while at the same time caring for people. But after Luke's duel, she said, Sylphy saved my life. She's been there as my friend the whole time, even after she found out that her parents had passed. I've depended on her so much, but enough is enough. It's about time I stopped relying on her and left her to walk her own path. Again, she was letting Sylphy go. But it's not to say that she still can't be at her side. That's pretty much confirmed at this point. Sylphy is still at Ariel's side. But the question is how much does she have to remain as Fitz, as the persona of Silent Fitz, the bodyguard of mystery? Everybody knows that she is now married to Rudius. That should be pretty obvious at this point. Ariel even said it herself, people are going to figure out that I've given my best person to Rudius. So I don't necessarily think that right here it's saying that Sylphy is putting on the facade of Silent Fitz and going marching out there as the boy. Because, like Rudi says, she ain't pulling it off anymore. She's got a much more feminine figure. She's got her hair grown out. She's not going to be Fitz. Nobody's going to mistake this as a boy. But I do believe that she is still working for Ariel, so she's still going to do her duties. Even though technically Ariel offered her a year off. And Sylphy said, I'll just save that for when I have a kid. Apparently she ain't going to take a whole year off. She's like, I got to get back to work. But no, I don't think this is Sylphy coming in here wanting to continue the aura of Silent Fitz. Now, it could get into an interesting storyline if that's the case. If there's an aspect of that Sylphy being transported to this other place, being taken under the protection of Ariel, becoming Ariel's bodyguard, becoming Silent Fitz, it's messed with her, and so she wants to continue being this person. Like there's a switch that turns on automatically that she doesn't even control. She just becomes that. That's sort of what I've been kind of hitting on a lot with the idea of how Sylphy doesn't express herself much or keeps it bottled in, is because that's just kind of the conditioning that she's gotten, being this person that doesn't speak, this person that keeps their emotions blocked up, this person of mystery. But putting that aside, the obvious answer here could be more in the idea that just Sylphy isn't comfortable being feminine, or at least feminine in public. During the later parts of Volume 10, when Sylphy had offered to grow her hair out, Rudi was mentioning the idea of her wearing one of the girls' uniforms, and she just was like, no, I don't think I would look good in that. And he was talking about buying one for her anyways, because he wanted to see how she looked in it, but this seems to be the case right here. Either she feels she wouldn't look good in it, or she just never decided to. It's just kind of an interesting thing. This is still an aspect of her, despite the fact that from Rudi's perspective, she's becoming more feminine, and she's allowing herself to become more feminine. So I'm hoping eventually they'll explain that. Roxy parted ways as well, reminding Rudius to address her as Professor Roxy on the grounds. He found the idea of her being his professor kind of spicy. Thinking until last night, he wondered if he could borrow the keys to the PE storage shed. Professor Naughty. We're getting into that territory. We're gonna do some role play. He abruptly remembered something important. He stopped Roxy, who turned to him with a professional and calm smile. He told her that she was late for a faculty meeting, because they always have like a really early faculty meeting. This revelation drained color from her face as she rushed off to the offices. With his loyal underlings in tow, Rudius headed for mandatory homeroom. Even with his wife's disappearing, he still had 2 cute girls at his side. Maybe his popular days had finally come. Not that he'd lay a hand on Linnea or Priscilla. It was tough being a man. Oh yeah, that reminds me. There's a rumor going around about you, boss. Oh, really? Yep, they're saying you fought a really epic battle. So epic, you lost your left hand. Ah, Zanoba must have said something. Or maybe Cliff heard from Eloise. That's our boss for you, nya. Flies off the demon continent and fights one of the 7 great powers, and sacrifices his own hand to win. 7 great powers? What? Your opponent had scuttled away in shame. Am I right? Way to go. Wait. Slow down for a second, Linnea. Risa wondered, how did this get twisted so much? What if it got circulating that he beat one of the 7 great powers? What if number 2, Orsted, heard about this? Well, that was the story. I just came up with it now. Don't worry, I'll make sure to spread it around. Yeah! He grabbed her tail and gave it a ferocious yank. Which, by the way, if you don't know about animals, don't pull their tail. That can mess up something. And you don't want to clean it up. I'll just say that. Don't pull an animal's tail. It breaks something. So makes me wonder if Lenny's gonna have problems in the future. Anyways, she lashed out, claws extended, but he evaded with his demon eye. After a few swipes, she grabbed her butt and glared at him with tears in her eyes. What was that for? Don't yank a lady's tail. Don't spread any exaggerated rumors around. You got that? I'll pull that thing right off of you. Huh? Got it. I'm sorry. They had a history of spreading rumors. They ended up telling everyone about his bedroom problems, which he forgave because it was true, but this was different. It could cause problems and he could wind up dead. Again, he kind of went into that before, this idea of people blowing up about who he is. And he's afraid of somebody powerful showing up and wanting to prove themselves to him. I mean, that's technically what happened with Bodigatti. Again, Kishirika kept talking about Rudi's, how amazing he is, and he has this special thing about him. And so Bodigutti's like, whoa, better go find out what's going on with this boy. It works. It happens. It's only a matter of time. And again, the whole idea of the 7 great powers itself was a problem, because if you were in that list and somebody wanted to become one of the 7 great powers, they're going to chase you down. They went on to explain that yes, there were people already making up stuff. Everybody could see that he had an artificial hand. He had apparently become semi-notorious figure on the campus. So speculation was inevitable. Still, he wanted to keep the 7 great powers out of it. That was dangerous territory. Orsted nearly killing him was still a vivid memory. Apparently some claim that he fought a Superb to death. Others said he faced 100 monsters alone. Some claim that he casted a forbidden ancient spell, losing his hand in the process. With them not sounding credible, he assumed that they would kind of disappear over time. Which again, it goes that whole thing of the thing after at the end of each chapter. Maybe that's the thing that's sticking. He did figure the 7 great powers were used to people inventing stories about them, so maybe they won't pay mind to this. Well, alright. Sorry about the tail. You human folks can't understand how much it hurt, yeah? It's unforgivable to yank a lady's tail. Fine, I'll buy you some fish one of these days, okay? Sweet. I should try to complain more often. Make mine meat instead. In homeroom, he was surrounded by the usual group. Zanoba, Julie, Linnea, Priscilla, and Cliff. Ginger stood in the back of the room. While it had been some time, being in class was immediately familiar. It was hard to imagine that 2 of them would be leaving this year, Linnea and Priscilla. Cliff spoke up. By the way, Rudius, is there a reason that you couldn't stop to say hello to me, along with all the others? Sorry about that, Cliff. I did stop by your place right after I got back, but it sounded like you and Eloise were otherwise occupied. I suppose I was with her that evening. Yes. All right. Never mind. My apologies. Cliff backed down quickly, but it seemed like people of his spectrum were particular about these types of formalities. Ariel was disgruntled with him leaving without a word too. He kind of noticed that back in his adventure days, everyone was pretty casual about this kind of stuff. You just kind of up and left and nobody was shocked. So it's kind of one of those habits that he's learning that he has to break. However, your first child's born, right? You could have gotten in touch about that at least. I'm still in training, but I could have offered her a blessing at least. Yeah, I guess. Oh, right. You don't belong to the Mills Church, so I suppose that's not necessary. Still, it almost feels as if you're avoiding me. I'm sure you're just busy with your child, but couldn't you have found time to drop by my laboratory at least once? he had a point. Maybe he was avoiding him. This is kind of curious. I'm like, he's not going to admit to that, right? No, it literally feels like Rudi's right here is starting to acknowledge the idea that maybe subconsciously, maybe I am avoiding him. He never thinks about, I want to avoid him, but there is this aspect here, this kind of guilt in a sense. There was a reason for that. He had 2 wives now, and Cliff was a devout member of the Mills Church. He probably wasn't going to react favorably to this news. Again, this is one of those moments where you're like, Rudius, do you and me know a different person here? Like this is one of those moments of like with Sylphy. Why is this a shock to you, Rudius? We all knew Sylphy was going to accept this, but you didn't. Again, right here, I don't feel Cliff is going to attack him for this. I think he's going to lecture him, and he definitely does. I don't see Cliff going, oh, so now I have a second wife. We can't be friends anymore. Ellen Lace is sort of a prime example of this idea that Cliff is, yes, a devout member of the Mills Church, but he's trying to change things. He's open-minded to things. He's not like, this has to fit through this hole, and if it doesn't exist. He's much more open-minded than that. And he sees you as a friend. Is there some reason why you don't want to see me, maybe? If so, I'd like to hear from you personally, if you don't mind. It's like, this sort of indicates right here that he already knows. I want to hear from you. He was being weirdly tenacious about this. Maybe Ellen Lace fill him in. Knowing her, she probably worked him over a little bit, saying things like, I know you're passionate about your faith, Cliff, but if you forgive him for his trespasses, you'll show everyone how tolerant and kind you are. I can totally see her doing that. He, of course, didn't need Cliff's forgiveness or permission to marry Roxy. But, and this is the part where I'll go with Rudius on this, he didn't want to ruin his friendship. He could confess to Cliff, accept his forgiveness, and compliment his open-mindedness. And then they would all put it behind them. A win-win, really. Okay, time to dance in Ellen Lace's strings. Actually, Cliff, pardon me. However, someone opened the door of the classroom. I so love this because it doesn't really this is such a good punchline because this is the build-up to just the funniest thing later. 2 people stepped inside. Their professor that ran the homerooms, and an adorable young lady in a robe with sleepy eyes and a serious but nervous expression. The sort of girl that obviously did her best all the time, and you couldn't help but wanting to hug, which, yes, means Roxy. The professor greeted everyone and introduced their new assistant that would be helping with the special class. Nice to meet you. I'm Roxy M. Greyrat. There it is. Cliff's desire to grandstand fire down. So good. Zanoba and the others stared in surprise. Professor Roxy might look quite young, but that's simply a trait of her people. She's actually over 50 years old. It seems she already has personal connections with some of you here. So I decided to place her here. For the moment, she'll be acting as my assistant, but we intend to have her take over class entirely the next year. Yeah? What's gonna happen to you, Professor Sampson? Rudius thought his name was Samson? That's news to me. Oh my gosh. It is time, folks, for our regularly scheduled Why Did You Miss the 7 C's? I need an actual quote thing that goes above my head. The it was. What does the it was mean? It never ends. That's actually the second typo I found in this volume already. 2 chapters, 2 typos. What the hell, dude? Anyways, Samson responded, I'll be heading back to my homeland next year. I no longer have a relative to look after in this class after all. Oh yeah, where did Rink go after the graduation anyways? My little sister's serving as a magic knight back at the Duchy of Neris. It sounds like she's doing quite well for now, but there's no telling what she'll end up getting up to if I'm not around to keep an eye on her. Yes, for those that don't remember, the Duchy of Neris was one of the 3 magic nations, the one that specifically manufactured magical implements. Reese learned later that it was common for the advisor for the special class to be someone that was related or knew somebody in the actual class itself, probably just to keep them in check. In the case of Samson, he was the brother of one of the special students who graduated just before Cliff enrolled. And that was, of course, Ren, and apparently she was very talented in magic, which, again, there, Samson, Ren, put that name down the docket, because I'm sure they'll come up later. Every time he names somebody, they pop up sometime. With Roxy, of course, having connections to both Zanoba and Rudius, it made her a perfect choice. Roxy looked around the room. I know I've already introduced myself to some of you, but again, my name is Roxy M. Greyrat. I'm the second wife of Rudius Greyrat over there. I'll try not to let that influence my actions as a professor, but I hope you'll be understanding. Yes, there it is. Cliff was pouting at this point. Rudius figured that Cliff wanted to hear about the second wife directly from him, allowing him to accept the situation gracefully and earn his gratitude. But now, his plans were ruined. Cliff? A second wife, is it? The word faithful is not part of your vocabulary, is it, Rudius? He had jumped to lecture mode. I know, I admit, I proved myself lacking in the loyalty department. I blessed your marriage with Sylphy. because you told me that you loved her and only her. You do remember that, don't you? Oof. And here it starts. Of course, I'm very grateful to you. Well, I suppose I knew from the start that you don't share my faith. I won't press the point any further. For what it's worth, you have my congratulations. I hope you're happy together. Thanks, Cliff. Cliff snorted. You know, I ran into your sister Norn in the city several times. She told me that she hoped to have a happy marriage just like yours someday. What? Did she say anything to you when you brought home a second wife, I wonder? She was very upset with me. I would expect so. She'd been praying at the church nearly every day for your safe return. And your father's. Ordinarily, your homecoming should have been a joyous one for her. But in the end, she did forgive me. Well, of course she did. She must have been afraid that you would kick her out of the house. I wouldn't do that to her, no matter what. Of course, I know you wouldn't. But put yourself in the shoes of the more vulnerable party here. The girl just lost her father. You're the only person that she could depend on now, you see? I think you really ought to try to be more considerate of her feelings as a family. Again, Cliff heating up here. You're right. Also, taking on a new partner is going to make your relationship more complicated. Women aren't objects to be collected, you know? Damn. He was hitting Rudius where it hurt. It felt as if he was getting grilled by a stern old priest or something. He could be more intense if he wanted to. Where do I start with this one? Yeah, the aspect about Norn itself just... Okay, overall with what Cliff is saying here, what I appreciate so much about this is, yes, this is kind of the preach, stern talking thing, but I don't think that's the case. This is like, he's not saying, how dare you, you sinful person. He's saying, look at other people around you. Look at who you're harming. And don't lose focus on what's important. Cliff, everything Cliff says here is all amen to go with his way here. This all makes perfect sense. You were supposed to be loyal. What does my blessing mean? My blessing is of the Millish Church. And this is what we believe. You told me you'd be faithful. You told me you'd be loyal, and thus I blessed you under the name of Millis. That's sort of a slap to his face, honestly, to be truthful. But even still, Cliff doesn't hate him. He's still accepting it. It's kind of the, dude, you told me you were going to do this and you didn't. But again, he still notes, I know you don't share my faith. So I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to use that against you. I'm not going to hate you for that. But then it shifts to the perspective of Norn. Again, when we got the whole issue with Norn blowing up on Rudius, it was really hard to follow her. I understood that she was mourning, she was upset, and it just blew up. But it was really hard to kind of follow her mindset there. It was really outrageous. And again, it was not technically her position to speak up. But yes, Cliff does make a good point here. She's still part of your family. And thus she still is hurting in the situation. And that Rudius should take note of Norn's position. And what she's going through. I like that he points out, she just lost her father. She doesn't have anything anymore. Great point. Again, it didn't really kind of put that into perspective in those last chapters. It never put in perspective that Norn right now is alone. Paul was everything to her. And she lost that one thing. Yes, now she still has Zenith. And again, she's trying to appease Zenith and her in a state that she's in right now. But Rudius is the only foundation, the only rock that she has right now. So he needs to step up. If he betrays her trust right now, she's got nothing. She's afraid. It is kind of interesting to note that. I don't necessarily fully believe what Cliff's saying here, but that's technically what was going through Norn's mind before. What did Norn always say? She was afraid that he would kick her out onto the street and she'd be all alone. She might still have those feelings. Cliff at least is seeing it. Maybe she confide that into Cliff. And now Cliff is telling him she was afraid you would kick her out. She forgave you because she didn't want you to kick her out. She could have said more. And I think he's seen that. Or at least she's confided that in him. So I'm glad that Cliff is willing to tell Rudi right now, open your eyes to what's going on with Norn. Protect her. Give her comfort. Give her security that she needs. Because she's scared right now, in a sense. Really good stuff here. So much good truth bombs from Cliff right now. But yeah, the smack in the face at the end of the idea of that women aren't objects to be collected. Don't just start marrying five, because he's starting to think that, well, I could get the third one. Like I said, Refugian keeps kind of dropping that, like, yeah, just keep in mind there could be a third. But it's like, yeah, Rudius, don't start saying that. The moment you start saying there could be a third, you're opening the door. This isn't a collection. You're not collecting them to put up on your wall. Just like the whole baby thing. You're not having a baby with Sylphy so you can put a trophy on the wall. These are people. Think of the more vulnerable. Right. Cliff, what is it, Rudius? One part of this story was brand new to Rudius, and he owed him gratitude for that. You were keeping an eye on Norn while I was away, weren't you? Thanks. I appreciate that. Cliff was looking after her. I noticed her in the church one day. So, we started talking a little. That's all. Oh, and on that note, you shouldn't be letting a girl that young wander around the city so freely. This area is safe enough, but I've heard of kidnappers lurking in the back alleys. Noting that one. I don't like that. I don't like that being brought up. You're right. I'll be more careful. Very well then. It seems you're appropriately repented, so I suppose I'll forgive you for your mistakes. St. Millis taught us to be lenient, after all. Appreciate it, Cliff. It's such a good little segment. It's just like that whole chapter with Cliff and Norn. Just seeing this other side of Cliff that he's grown so much. He still wants that. He still wants that puffing up of his ego. Reese even knows that. He wants that little moment. But no, putting aside that joke, Cliff has such some good words. He's so caring. He's so deceptively caring. It's crazy. Edelase has changed him. Rudis was forgiven. Maybe this was a confessional rather than a conversation. Still, he made a lot of good points. Rudis was definitely feeling bad for how he treated Norn now. He'd have to be twice as kind to her from now on. With the lecture over, Samson got homeroom underway. Roxy standing at his side the whole time, looking supremely uncomfortable. Rudis blew her a kiss, which earned him a small laugh, followed by a scowl of disapproval. I can see Roxy standing next to him, and he does a little, and she just kind of giggles and then goes, "Damn it, stop it." I love Roxy. This is the chemistry with Roxy in this university has spiced things up so well it's not even funny. For the next while, Reese's life proceeded as normal. Checking in on Zanoba and Cliff, dropping in to help Nanahoshi, using free hours to work on his book or study the magic absorbing stones. He had a lot to occupy his time, making him a little nostalgic for the days that he only had like 1 or 2 things to devote to. His time immediately after classes did change though. Previously he was helping Norn study, but he shifted to helping her with the sword. He was afraid of how it would affect her academics, but she promised him that she would work hard to stay on track. He was willing to give her a chance, feeling that it was best for her to pursue these things while she was passionate and motivated. One evening, Rudis found himself heading back home with Sylphy alone. They discussed recent events of the university. As the student council would soon be bringing in members, she kind of suggested that he join as well, which he unfortunately said no, he didn't have much spare time. Nearly pulled him into that room. Rudis doesn't want to be involved with that. Arriving home, immediately when Rudis opened the door, Aisha threw her arms around him. "Welcome back, Rudius. Would you like dinner? Or a bath? Or maybe me?" Such a trope. What does she? Oh my gosh. He yelled out, "You!" and tickled her armpits mercilessly until she fled cackling with laughter before receiving a chop from Lilia. So cute. He headed for the bath, and while it was on her list, it wasn't ready. And with them still working on dinner, that meant that you was the only real option available there. He didn't take baths alone these days. At some point, they started using it in pairs. It was kind of an unspoken rule at this point. He never really heard this custom before, but whatever. Today, Aisha followed him into the bath. She was 11, but she seemed to lack any sense of shame. He had to correct her to tell her to cover up with a towel, claiming it to be polite. She agreed, but Reese kind of wished that she'd learn a little more from her sister. It was nice having a little sister. She liked to wiggle her way between his legs, demand to wash her back, rinse her head. It was a good thing that she was a sister, though, and the fact that she was scrawny, or he might end up with another wife on his hands. If Roxy or Sylphy tried the same stunt, he was confident that he'd lose all self-control. Again, this is one of those aspects that I do like. It's partly because there's the sister aspect that seems to be sort of a block for him, but this is, as perverted as it is, this is a sign of Rudius changing. Having Aisha right here, he's not getting inappropriate thoughts. He's not getting worked up. Because this is my sister. Again, as uncomfortable as it was for a lot of people early on the story, including myself for a lot of cases, that was Rudius. He was a nasty, nasty pervert. And now he's changed a lot. I really like that aspect. He settled in to enjoy some pleasant family bonding time with Aisha. The two of them washing off each other, while Aisha told him about the events of the day. Mostly trivial things. Lucy did something adorable. Zenith helped out with the weeding. Lilia dozed off next to the window. Aisha planted something new in the garden, that sort of stuff. He didn't trust Aisha with the seed rice. She promised that she'd give it a shot once the weather got warmer. She was a genius. So he was optimistic that eventually he would have himself a private supply. As they got out of the bath, Roxy returned home and they had dinner. After the meal, Rudis watched Lucy as she fed away with Sylphy. It was hard to believe that she would get chubby just because she was the daughter of Sylphy, but he'd have to make sure that when she got bigger, he put her through some exercises. The girl's going to town. He's obsessed with that, I swear. He technically did the same with Zenith, but it's like, dude, seriously, please, you're obsessed with this. There's certain things that Rudis obsesses over that I just like, please stop. As the family relaxed, Rudius taught Aisha a little magic. Roxy went to her room to prepare for tomorrow's classes. Sylphy juggled attending Lucy while practicing her own magic. Dillo would wander over to Rudius every now and then to get some attention. Apparently, Aisha was responsible for taking care of Dillo. He's kind of pretty much turned into a loyal guard dog, rather than an armadillo. Once everybody was gone, Rudius then welcomed Sylphy up to their room. Picking her up, he carried her princess style to the bed. After that, well, they enjoyed some private time. By the way, did they just leave Lucy down there? It never says what happens to Lucy. It's like everybody's retiring, and then Rudius is down here with Sylphy, and then he just princess picks her up and goes upstairs to their bedroom. It's like, wait, who's looking after Lucy? That's how my mind works. Is immediately I go, okay, who has the baby? That's how my mind works. I'm always like, who's taking care of the baby? Where's the baby? Who's taking care of the baby? I don't know. Maybe when it did say that Lilia retired with Zenith, but maybe she grabbed Lucy and took her with her, or maybe when Aisha went to bed, I don't know. I'm sure somebody's keeping track of her. Following this, he was mentally and physically fulfilled, ready to fall asleep with his wife in his arms. But before that, he slipped out of bed, sneaked all the way downstairs to the basement, where he glanced back to make sure nobody was looking before he opened his hidden door. Inside was an altar with holy idols enshrined inside, a bundle of cloth to the uninitiated. But he knew the divine spirits of Roxy and Sylphy dealt within them. Tonight, like every night, he offered up prayers of gratitude. And in Legend of University #2, the boss can make his eyes light up. That's the one I understood the first one. That made sense with the hand. He can rocket punch. I don't understand what the boss's eyes can make his eyes light up. I missed the joke there. I don't know what that one is. But, yeah. That's chapter 2. My gosh, these chapters are long. So this is going to be a long recording just for 2 chapters. I'm going to have to get back to really condensing more, and I don't like doing that, especially with so much dialogue. And plus, this has been some really fun. Bear with me, because this has been some really, really much needed slice of life stuff, and I've really enjoyed every single one of these segments. This is pretty much like, remember back when they were first doing the slice of life stuff in the university and Renoa? I wasn't really liking a lot of it. It felt, yeah, it was some fun parts, like the whole ghost in the house and everything, but God, that was just a bunch of good stuff in this one, especially like around Zanoba. It was so great. But this is like, again, I just want to enjoy this stuff right now. I want to just take my time and enjoy this stuff right now before things hit the fan again. It's really enjoyable stuff. But now this later part right here, I think is some interesting stuff, because he's still doing the altar thing, which we all assume is still a thing. He's finally back home. He's, once again, praying to his shrine. The really interesting thing here is that I don't think he's ever noted that the divine spirit of Sylphy dwells inside of it. He's always had the holy relic in there, and it was a symbol of Roxy, but it was always kind of like, here was this other cloth in there with it. He's never specifically said divine spirits of Roxy and Sylphy. I think this is the first time he's ever called. Now, I don't think he's ever called Roxy a divine spirit. He's always called her a goddess and this thing of worship. But specifically now, he's actually clarifying them, or at least titling them as divine spirits of Roxy and divine spirit of Sylphy. That's different. That seems like a change. I'll have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure he's never referred to those things as that. He had this very important cloth in there, which was Sylphy, but he's never noted this is divine spirit of Sylphy, which I think is a very interesting change to this whole thing. He is now basically deifying something of Sylphy now, which I'll have to note for later. And like I said before, my theory that I have is what is the possibility that Rudius is able to essentially bestow upon somebody the ability to be a divine being. Again, the idea that Rudius has been worshiping Roxy for so long, what are the chances that she does actually become a deity? Again, going back to the whole labyrinth thing, him being able to find her, he sensed her like a divine pull. What is the chances that now that it's sort of, again, it could be been doing this for a while, maybe it was worded differently, maybe the translation was different, but maybe now that we're now establishing that he is seeing this divine spirit of Sylphy in here now, what is the chance that he can do that same thing for Sylphy? Who knows? But yeah, good stuff, good stuff. Nice little breather time for slice of life for Rudius and my own heart. Really did enjoy it. Hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Mondays. I'm going to, of course, cut it off there because it's already going way too freaking long, but them's the breaks sometimes. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Monday. As always, if you did, before you leave, make sure to hit that like button down below. I really do appreciate you guys' support, all the kind words that you guys have given me. And yes, especially those that support through Patreon, tips, links, super thanks, memberships of the channel itself. It's your guys' monetary support is what keeps this going, and I greatly appreciate it. It really does mean so much to me that you guys are willing to part with your hard-earned money in order to keep this going. Additionally, thanks to everybody for their kind words, and yes, thanks to the moderators in the chat for keeping this going. I kind of mentioned last week in the Discord, like, you guys don't realize just how much, like, these premieres would not happen without the mods, so give a shout out to the mods, Adrian, Earthly. They are incredible, and again, without them, we wouldn't be doing this, because otherwise I'd just post the video and leave the comments off. It would just be nothing but just posting the video, and I love the premieres. The premieres are so much fun. Love having you guys here every week. It's just such a fulfilling thing for my weekly schedule. So anyhow, thank you guys for joining me, and until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care. As Roxy rushed to get ready for work, Rudi admitted her. As Roxy, they both seen each... Looking back, yes, Rudi acknowledged they were lacking in physical... Looking back, they were lacking on physical attack... Looking back, they were lacking in the physical... Looking back, they were lacking in the physical attack part.
It's a fruit of my... it's the fruit of my 6 months... it's a loot...
He kept caressing Roxy for a lengthy period... He kept caressing Roxy for a lengthy period of time. He kept caressing Roxy for a lengthy period. He kept caressing Roxy for a lengthy period. He kept caressing Roxy for a lengthy period of time. Why can't I say this? He kept caressing Roxy for a lengthy period of time. He kept... Our daughter is adorable as ever, I see. No kidding. Why is she so cute anyways? Backwards. Our daughter is quite... Our daughter is as adorable as ever. Our daughter is as... With them not sounding credible, he assumed that they would disappear after no. With them not sounding very credible, he assumed they would disappear after no. With them not sounding credible, he assumed that they would disappear after no. It seems you appropriately repented. It seems you're appropriately. Why can't I say this?